Matt, great to see you.
Great to be here. Thank you, Joe.
Well, I appreciate you carving out some time. I know the Liongard team is super busy. So, speaking of Liongard, and your role at Liongard, I know a lot of our viewers are familiar with you, but for those who aren't, tell us a little bit about what you're up to at Liongard.
Yeah, so I'm the VP of product at Liongard. I've been with the company since the middle of 2018. So in kind of startup software company years, I've been around a while.
Mhm.
I oversee our team of product managers, requirements engineers, UX design folks. So we set the company product roadmap and we just kind of design those outcomes. And before Liongard, I was with an MSP for over a decade. So I've got quite a bit of experience in almost all areas of the MSP business.
Yeah, it's one of the wonderful things about Liongard. I know a lot of the executive team has that MSP DNA, and you can't fake it in this market, right? You either have that DNA or you don't. And one of the brief things I've been briefed on multiple times at Liongard is sort of that end-to-end visibility and various use cases there. I know there's a lot of different use cases for Liongard and how you're working with your partners, but connect the dots for me, in particular with security. What's the thought process there in terms of that end-to-end visibility and then security and some of the trends you're seeing in the market?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that visibility leading to security outcomes is one of the kind of key things that that we enable with our platform and that we hear when we talk to our partners, right? That's one of the highest value things you can do with Liongard. And the basic thing that Liongard does, just sort of from a really fundamental 10,000 foot perspective, is we provide both deep and broad visibility into how are all the things in your tech stack, right, that you maintain for your customers, how are they all set up? What's the configuration state of those things? So sort of the depth that some other tools might provide, but we're providing it across the entire stack and bringing all that data into one place. And where that becomes valuable as a security outcome is if we start to think about kind of the baseline configuration of systems, right? If we need to, as an industry, be able to put our customers into kind of a known good state, especially from a security perspective, and be able to make sure that they stay there, that all the switches and dials are turned the right directions. And I think increasingly that we're aligning all of that to some real industry standards, right? So going beyond just kind of checking the technical boxes or doing sort of a well-informed best effort at how all those switches and dials should be turned, but aligning to well-regarded standards.
Okay, so Matt, that visibility, before I dive deeper into the security portion of that, visibility can mean different things to different MSPs. What components do you provide visibility on?
Yeah, so visibility, we talk about it from sort of the cloud to the endpoint. So full stack visibility, but specifically when we talk about visibility, we mean the ability to see into deep configuration state, right? So we're less of a sort of log management, log streaming type tool. We're less of a kind of real-time dashboard, and we are more of a let's gain that deep visibility into how is something configured, and not just something, but all of the things across the stack. That's where the power comes from.
Right. In the MSP world, are there certain things the MSPs could be doing with this visibility to align with good defendable standards, et cetera? I mean, how do you think the MSPs could be doing even better in their world?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of standards out there, right? And like the CIS, critical security controls, is one of the just kind of standard ones that come to mind, and that just really goes through some of the foundational things that any IT organization should be doing to secure their customers. It starts from having a solid inventory. Just what are all of the IT kind of assets, users, pieces of software that are in the environment. Like let's start there, but then going further to, okay, are all of the sort of security related knobs and switches kind of turned and flipped the right directions? Do we have MFA turned on? Do we have the right types of antivirus, not just present in the environment, but fully deployed, configured correctly? Those are the sorts of things that when you want to gain that visibility into them across the entire stack, that's where a tool like Liongard really shines. And to go a little bit deeper into some of the kind of specific kind of features and manageability outcomes from there. I mean, once we get into, okay, we have that visibility, but how do we leverage it in a sort of scalable way? That's
Right.
where we can do things like writing our actionable alert rules to go, okay, this specific, piece of information, this particular switch, if it gets flipped the other way, I don't just want to have to go in and dig out that outcome. I want you to send me a ticket. Or if some critical piece of configuration state changes, right? If we see a privileged security group, if we see the members of that change, those are the kinds of things that we inspect every few hours or every day, that we're pulling that data in, and we can go, okay, if that changes, we want to know about that right away, right? We want a ticket for that. So it's taking, I kind of think about it as, or I've heard our partners describe it as, oh, you're the DVR, right? You're this living record of all of the things that have happened in my environment. So you build up that sort of that data asset, that corpus of knowledge to be able to, if you want to, right? If you're sort of trying to do a root cause analysis or some kind of security incident response, you can go back into the data that we've gathered and go, okay, what happened? Let's kind of dig through that and put the picture together. But on a proactive basis, you can get those alerts and change detections as they happen. So we kind of try to cover both sides of that.
Yeah, listen, that's powerful. I'm not an MSP, but as an entrepreneur who has, for lack of a better definition, managed hosted websites and things of that nature, if there was an issue, the first thing I always ask myself and my business partners, what changed? Yep. It sounds like you're automating that conversation across thousands of endpoints, devices, the end-to-end stack, so to speak, in an automated way rather than a manual way, correct?
That's correct. And that's a great example of a really kind of accessible and simple use case for Liongard, one among many use cases, but, of our, roughly 75 inspectors, right? The things that pull data from a particular piece of technology, one of them is an internet domain inspector. And one of the very simplest things that our partners say, wow, Liongard saved my bacon there, is sort of the classic, we got a new web developer, they kind of took over DNS and forgot that DNS does other stuff besides the website. Now our email is down, our phone's offline. And with Liongard, it's a pretty simple matter of going back on that timeline and going, okay, well, the change happened right here on the timeline. And fortunately, we were also recording what was the state of all the rest of those DNS records? What were they before, so that we can get back to green as quickly as possible?
Very cool. Very cool. So you and I are having this conversation in early December 2022. Without looking too far into Chris, I know crystal balls aren't perfect, but I also know you're a market watcher, right? And there's a lot of themes and trends out there: cyber insurability, various regulations that may or may not be popping up into the MSP world. What are you seeing in your crystal ball in terms of the things MSPs should be aware of on this topic front?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it does kind of triangulate back to security, but I mean, the sort of larger macro trend is that as more and more businesses become more and more dependent on technology, right? So as more and more kind of dollars flow through the system, essentially, and are digitized in a certain manner of speaking, that presents the ever bigger security profile for businesses of all sizes, right? Like I think that's what we're feeling in the MSP space, is that really sophisticated security outcomes aren't just for big companies anymore. We kind of need those throughout, because there's money flowing through the system at all levels of the economy. So security is the big macro outcome there. And then how I think that is hitting MSPs and will continue to hit them and going into 2023 does connect back to some of those things you were just saying. The ability to get a cyber risk insurance policy, the sort of impending, I was going to say threat, it's probably not really a threat, but the change that will come into the industry when and if new regulations come down around how are we going to sort of police ourselves or be policed as far as how we're securing our customers. MSPs are uniquely positioned to be the experts, though. That's the thing, right? Like small and medium businesses are not equipped to do these security things themselves. So the opportunity for MSPs to do them is there, and is in fact a great opportunity, but we need to do them well.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I know. I think one of the things, and I'm not speaking for all MSPs, I'll say some MSPs. I think some of them are guilty of just throwing like EDR at the problem or backup and disaster recovery at the problem, and those are valid solutions, no
Right.
doubt. But what you're talking about here is that that alignment with good defensible standards. Do you see MSPs making progress in that area?
I think some are like I think that there's a spectrum of kind of how serious and how forward looking a given MSP is on that topic. But that sort of speaks to I think I may have said earlier the sort of well educated best effort of security, right? Like that's the throw the EDR at it. That's the well, let's obviously set up the firewalls, flip all the security features on, but um, that still isn't a necessarily a comprehensive strategy to protect your customers from a technical perspective, right? Unless you're really running a playbook,
Right.
you're probably going to miss something. And then when we get sort of beyond the technical outcomes into, okay, what are the insurance type outcomes? What are the legal type outcomes if something does go wrong? The MSP is just in such a stronger position if they can say, well, I did all the things that this well-recognized industry standard best practice said I should have done.
Right.
The fact that that's a different conversation that you're having if you're breached when you've checked all of those boxes versus you sort of were doing a DIY version of that to a certain degree.
Yep. Yep. And listen, I think MSPs, generally speaking, their hearts are in the right place. They're committed to doing this. I
Yeah.
think one of the holdups is sometimes they view it as one more manual thing they don't have time for. Whereas you're describing sort of that world of next generation automation. And one of the things I worried about, and this includes the media, by the way, sometimes the bloggers such as myself, we write automation without going in depth in terms of like, well, what does that really look like for the next generation of MSPs? From your vantage point, you shared some anecdotes about just how much of this can be automated. Can you share some more anecdotes? Do you see sort of this next generation of automation taking hold? And if so, where?
Yes. So to clarify the question, said sort of in that visibility category specifically.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also, and when it comes to sort of cyber visibility and or that reaction or the automation of alerts, et cetera, how much work is involved in that versus just switching it over to an automated approach?
Yeah, I mean the amount of maintenance. So if I go back to like CIS which is something there's the critical security controls. That's sort of one of those frameworks that we are talking to a lot of our MSPs about, right? Like that's the one that comes up most in conversations, I would say, of MSPs who are looking to evolve towards that sort of standardized defensible security posture. The amount of work to audit, to sort of check all those boxes with humans, right? With manual labor is tremendous.
Right.
Keeping up with a simple asset inventory, software inventory, validating on even an annual basis, let alone a quarterly basis. Have we had any configuration drift, right? Like even if we set it up in that state, are we still in that state? That's a totally impractical thing to do by hand. So some
Right.
level of automation and reporting of those outcomes is just necessary.
Yep. Yep. And not only necessary, but can you put in the word possible and achievable
Yeah,
for MSPs now?
absolutely. It is possible to automate these things, and that starts with visibility, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's where I can connect us back to Liongard's vision for how we're solving this problem. So when you onboard Liongard as a solution, the fundamental thing that you're setting up is these inspectors that give you visibility, right? The first thing that we give MSPs when they set up Liongard in a new environment and for a new customer is that persistent, both broad and deep visibility. And I increasingly refer to that as the baseline. Okay, now as an MSP, I have the baseline. Where is this customer at?
Right.
And out of the box, we give you those abilities that I mentioned earlier. So we can now alert when something goes into a bad state. We can now get automated change detections when something that we think should be static is changing, and we can look into that. So there is sort of kind of a maturity curve to climb there. as
Sure.
far as how an MSP does that, right? So having that baseline visibility, getting to the point where, okay, we have a set of, alerts and change detections that are sort of helping to circumscribe, well, how do we want this to be? And then the sort of the next maturity evolution that we are also working on evolving our product to ever better support is going from the baseline, from where are we today to where do we want to be, to be
Right.
able to really encode those standards of whether it's CIS, CSC, or potentially some other standard. How do we sort of represent that in software and go, okay, well, here's where we are and here's where we want to be. And that's where we can also that's where we can not only empower MSPs to have very mature processes and abilities in making sure that their customers are in a good state, are kind of held to those standards, but also start to have some of those conversations that drive revenue as well, right? Okay,
Yeah.
we are here, we need to be here. It's not me necessarily as an MSP saying you should be over here. This is what the standard says.
Right.
So now we need to talk about how do we get from point A to point B.
Right. Okay, Matt. So you've discussed the power of visibility, end-to-end visibility. You've talked quite a bit about sort of the cyber trends there. Can you connect the dots to me, for me and our viewers, in terms of some of the macroeconomic trends that the SMBs are seeing out there, and how this all comes together?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so yeah, I think probably everyone who's taking the time to listen to this podcast in the first place is familiar with the macroeconomic conditions that are facing all of us, and those are going to impact both MSPs and their customers. So, but I connect that to sort of the security and visibility discussion, in that basically the headwinds that are facing us are going to cause that downward cost pressure across the board, right? So MSPs are looking at their tools and looking for which ones provide the sort of automation and efficiency to run their businesses more effectively. MSP customers are going to be looking at where's the value coming from, right? Am I getting enough value for my dollar? And the sort of nexus of those things from the security perspective is, if we can, as an industry, provide those security outcomes that our customers expect, that the sort of cyber crime conditions are pressuring us all to provide, that regulations and cyber insurance vendors are increasingly putting on MSPs to provide. But if we can do it with automation, right? If we can bring in some tools that make that process more efficient, more consistent, more reliable, give that high quality data without a human having to go off and gather it, that's the sweet spot where we can gain some both some quality and some efficiency as an industry.
But for MSPs that are not familiar with Liongard, is there a particular starting point, a URL, landing page, and then as they begin to learn about Liongard, is there low-hanging fruit they can start with? So where do you want to start there?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of where to learn more about Liongard, liongard.com is a great resource. I mean, obviously, but we have a self-guided tour of the platform, and you can book a live demo with somebody from our team to walk through it. We are kind of continually blogging and posting new info on industry trends. And then we have a social media presence. So LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, kind of the standard ones. As far as where to get started kind of with the product, I mean, there are some very straightforward use cases for Liongard, right? Like I mentioned one earlier of just quite simply, are we managing our public facing DNS in a good way? If a web developer did come in, and I love web developers, but like if one new one comes in and breaks your DNS records, how are you going to get back to green? Are you confident enough in your documentation to do that? And then just, I mean, you can extrapolate from there of what other things might be enabled by that visibility, not just into internet domain and DNS kind of stuff, but into everything. So I mean, from there we're going into, okay, what kind of power can we get from having that inspection capability on our firewall, and maybe not just a single firewall, but all of our firewalls. A recent anecdote was a major firewall vendor in the industry had a very critical vulnerability in one particular firmware version. And the story that we heard from some of our partners post that was, well, if I didn't have Liongard, I would have had to go and do some sort of audit project to even understand what my risk was. And with Liongard, that was a 4-click report. What firmware versions are vulnerable? Okay, to my NOC team, here is the list. Go and upgrade these. Go remediate this today. That took a week-long remediation down to a day.
Amazing, amazing. Well, great stuff. Well, Matt, thank you for the updates. I appreciate it. Always good to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.